Good day, everyone. First of all, in behalf of GABRIELA, we would like to congratulate the International Forum in celebrating the 50 years anniversary. It's really a big, what do you call this?
Milestone.
Milestone, yes. 50 years, imagine 50 years, you know. So, and also thank you for inviting us in this event, joining in this event, and hopefully we will be able to share a lot of stuff during this day. Thank you very much. So now Kathy and me will share the presentation. So I would like to introduce GABRIELA first. GABRIELA is established in 1984 as a coalition against the U.S. Marcos dictatorship. GABRIELA is at the forefront of the Filipino women's struggle for freedom and democracy. GABRIELA stands for General Assembly binding women for reforms, integrity, education, leadership, and action. It is also named in honor of Gabriela Silang, the first Filipino woman to lead a revolt against the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. From being a coalition of 42-member organization, GABRIELA today, as a grassroots-based national alliance, has 250 member organizations and international chapters, desks, institutions, and programs working to free women from all forms of economic and political oppression and discrimination. GABRIELA Germany is an extension of the Filipino women's struggle in Germany. At the same time, it seeks to unite with other local organizations that struggle and advance similar causes. So let me go on to the analysis on imperialism today. As imperialism is in crisis, imperialist countries try to stay afloat and maintain their glory by overtly and covertly invading other resource-rich but economically underdeveloped countries to get themselves the natural and mineral resources of those developing countries. Since the financial meltdown of 2008, the global capitalist countries has never been recovered. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has been continuing to ravage across the globe up to now, has worsened the crisis and also exposed the multiple structural flaws of the global capitalism. It has intensified inequalities. It left millions of people slide down to poverty due to sudden unemployment. It has caused an increase in domestic violence and abuse of women due to prolonged lockdowns, and it has revealed that even in the face of a pandemic, the capitalist greed will prioritize private profit from public health. Policies and approaches that are militaristic in nature, like that in the Philippines, were used to quell attempts to mobilize and express defiance against failed approaches. In general, COVID-19 responses failed to protect the most vulnerable from the health and socioeconomic impacts of it. It further revealed that inequalities embedded in relations of production are perpetuated by the continuing plunder of imperialist countries. Today, we see that the addition of new imperialist countries, China and Russia, has further intensified the inter-imperialist contradictions. This ensues a new round of fight for the redivision of the world. But even as the anti-imperialist contradictions between the US and China are sharpening, those between the US and Russia are also sharpening in Europe, Central Asia, and West Asia. The US is investing on its traditional alliance with Western Europe and Japan in facing up to the Eurasian alliance of Russia and China. However, we see that among all the imperialist powers, there is still a complex interweaving of contentions and collaborations. Despite having their own imperialist interests, they try to maintain amicable relations among themselves by uniting against the working people, racialized, discriminated, and all other oppressed peoples in both their countries and the underdeveloped countries. They also shift the burden of imperialist crisis to them. They are inevitably, however, driven to increase their super profits, engage in political rivalry, in economic competition, and to expand their share of global hegemony. The US, for example, continued to impose neoliberal policies through its international financial institutions like the IMF to underdeveloped and deeply indebted countries as conditionalities for borrowing anew. China, on the other hand, have also successfully able to sign up developing countries for its Belt and Road Initiative, which actually meant debts from China to build infrastructural gaps that these developing countries hope to fill. In other words, the initiative is trapping countries in debt, predominantly developing and underdeveloped ones. There are increasingly sharper social and political contradictions in the developing countries and of the imperialist powers. The sharpest, however, which are manifested in their electoral contests are those between the reformista and fascist trends. The progressive and revolutionary organizations still need to strengthen politically and expand organizationally to succeed in winning over the people to lead mass struggles and movements. The imperialists spread and maintained their dominance and continued exploitation through economic, social, and political means in their own home ground and in the underdeveloped countries. They resort to racism and fascism in order to crush any form of dissent. At the same time, they bombard us with decadent individualist cultures and concepts so as to maintain an indifferent pro-Western generation. In developing countries, any form of dissent and assertion of rights and sovereignty are quelled by supporting, even creating, authoritarian regimes and dictators, as long as these dictators and tyrants follow their rules as puppets. These regimes, through their military and other armed forces, pave the way of big capitalist and multinational corporations from imperialist countries. The broad number of people, however, are increasing their resistance against imperialism and all reaction. To find ourselves today in a world that is still dominated by unabated monopoly capitalist production, in existential crossroads involving a pandemic, a deep economic recession, devastating climate crisis, extreme inequality, wars of aggression, racism, and fascism. More than ever, we, the exploited peoples of the world, need to further build our unity to resist imperial wars, wanton plunder of the natural resources, racism, fascism, and all other forms of discrimination. We have to strengthen our organizations and wage various forms of anti-imperialist struggles in every space we can. Now I will turn it over to Kathy, who will do the presentation on which areas imperialism do we prioritize to fight and why.
Thank you so much. So that sounds like a very short analysis of imperialism that we have. We can further discuss it later after our presentation. But just to give you a guide or orientation, so I'm gonna give you some experiences and some of the. I'm sorry. Should I sit down? Okay. So that you can also see me. it doesn't sound like just an audio book or something. Anyway, so the next part of the presentation will be sharing of the experiences, also even challenges in our, let's say, day-to-day anti-imperialist work. And later on, we will give you, or we will show you videos that actually give a more concrete context on why there is a necessity of revolutionary struggle in the Philippines. So again, we are from GABRIELA, and thank you for having us here. Yes, so correct. Just to give you a very brief context for now, we see the Philippine society as dominated by foreign investment, foreign military, and whatnot. And at the same time, above this imperialist power that it has, you have a very old feudal bondage that's actually the legacy of the Spanish colonization. So you have a very dire condition of mostly 80% of the population are farmers that are actually deprived of their own lands because these lands are still owned by hacienderos. So you can already see that where this kind of land ownership is coming from. It's from the Spanish colonization. And of course, we call it a graft-ridden government, but actually, even the Guinness records recognize this, that one of the basic problems of the Philippines is that the politicians or the people who rule the government are not only puppets of the imperialist power, but also they enrich themselves of the riches that could actually should go to the people. Yeah, so it's a painting illustrated by Boy Dominguez, one of a very progressive painter in the Philippines. Just for you to also appreciate this work. Yes. So first of all, so since we are a mass, we consider ourselves as mass organization, at the same time alliance. So there are chapters in different parts of the globe that are organizations. But in the Philippines, it's actually mostly an alliance. So you have here organizations coming from different sectors. There are organizations from the students, from peasantry, from working people, from professionals, even from health workers. So it's really trying to unite the broadest possible alliance of all oppressed people or all oppressed classes. And of course, the orientation is genuine liberation and genuine democracy, because we can always talk about democracy and liberation, but we always have kind of different imagination what it is. That's why we always put that word genuine, and later on we could discuss what that means. And I think one characteristic or one shining orientation of the GABRIELA is that we are women, but we recognize the fact that we should align ourselves with all the oppressed peoples of the in the Philippines, of course, also here. So whatever we do in the Philippines, we try to kind of emulate or try to look into the specific conditions of the country and try to see which principles can actually be used or can be repeated. So we don't forget that there are also other classes or other oppressed peoples that also strive for genuine liberation and democracy. That's why you would see GABRIELA in May 1 Labor Day mobilizations. You would see GABRIELA going to farmers' initiatives or kind of actions where the leading sector are farmers. You would see GABRIELA going with the urban poor communities, asserting their right for housing, asserting their right for decent or health access. You would see GABRIELA with the labor union, the Kilusang Mayo, the Pay One Laborers Union, who are uniting with them in their call for decent wages and ending contractualization and better working conditions, etc. So it's not like this kind of feminist bubble that to empower women we have to just on the record, we are not against those kind of calls, but we do not limit ourselves to those kind of calls. So we still recognize the fact that we have to also assert what our body wants and all those things, but we should not forget that we are oppressed class, and this is the reason why we have to unite with all those oppressed classes in order to achieve that kind of democracy and freedom that we want. Next, please. Yeah, so as I have said, these are the particular characteristics, and we are not afraid of saying that we are also an anti-imperialist organization or alliance. So it means in all of our political alliances, or all our political work and political actions, we always make sure that at the end of the day, even that particular call is to let's say to end all, to pass the bill. For example, in the Philippines, the bill on pushing that violence against women, a bill that would protect the women to decide on whatever they want with their bodies. So we also engage in those kind of advocacies. But we always raise the level of advocacy into something that, why do we even have to assert the freedom for our bodies? It is because those ruling class actually want, or actually suppress us from realizing the full potential of our gender. We are being told that we are the lesser gender than the male. So it is always like getting into the roots of where is all this discrimination coming from, and actually trying to advance that advocacy, but at the same time also to dismantle the system that maintains it. Something like that. So also to put it into a clearer perspective, we always have a class bias, so to speak. So we always, when we organize, we always look into that bias that the most oppressed are those that have to be organized. So that's why we look into the basic alliance. So we rely into the basic alliances of those majority of the population that are really oppressed, and those are the working class and the peasant class. If we are organizing, it should be in those areas. But we also don't forget the fact that there is a necessity to win over the middle class. Because the moment the middle class take up that struggle of the basic classes, then it could also shift the balance of political strength, you know. But of course, you know, middle class, if we do a kind of class analysis, they're always vacillating. Maybe they would go to the ruling class, maybe they would join us, the exploited class, in this struggle. But we always have that in mind. And in fact, in GABRIELA, Germany, we are confronted with one of these challenges, because those sorry, that's just a way to give a kind of diagram on how to represent the specific characteristic of the women's struggle. So there's a bigger circle. Our comrade from Spain also have this circle. It looks like one of our favorite illustrations is to use this kind of bubbles or circles. Anyway, just to pinpoint that this big circle is the entire, if that's the entire struggle of the oppressed class in the Philippines. So we are hugely part of it, but it doesn't mean that when we, for example, achieve that level of freedom and democracy, there's still another level of of a struggle that women have to go through, and that mainly is this cultural, we always call it, sorry, the word doesn't occur to me right now, but it's about unlearning those patriarchal thoughts that are being imposed on us. So if you free women from economic and political oppression, there is still this kind of patriarchal chain that you have to dismantle or to destroy. Yeah. So, as I have said, in Germany, the task that we are actually doing, it's not only about going out and building solidarity with other organizations, but also to organize our compatriots, because Philippines also have a lot of population. Actually, you can call it already diaspora, because 10 million or now 11 million of Filipinos. It's actually even more than Denmark. You have 4 million? 5 million. So if all diasporic Filipinos would be here, you would be 16 million. So the Filipinos that go out of the country we use this AOM. I think our comrade from Spain also have this analyze, educate, and action.
Analysis, educate.
Yeah, so we have also something like that, AOM, it's arouse, organize, mobilize. So we also do it here with our compatriots. So arouse meaning, what are their aspirations? How do we make them realize they're actually exploited? How do we make them realize that the reason for them to go out of the Philippines and to take their chance in a country like Germany is driven by those systems that actually deprive them for having a decent job in the Philippines? And organize meaning to give them that empowerment. Our brand of empowerment is to give them the knowledge how to fight for their rights so that they themselves organize. So as members of GABRIELA Germany, we don't see ourselves as like kind of above the people that we organize. So our brand of our organization, or lifting their political consciousness, is for them to really realize they could also be political, and that they start organizing themselves. Yeah, and to mobilize is, of course, when they are already political enough that they start going out of the streets to fight for their rights, or joining campaigns to be able to achieve some victories, and to be able to really express what do they want for our society, and who are their enemies. This is very important. Yeah. Next, please. So as Tita Nan said, it started in 1984 in the Philippines, actually at the height of Marcos dictatorship. Thanks. Yeah, I have animations. And it grew to many different chapters. So we have in Australia, we also have in Hong Kong. All of these actually have very different characteristics. For example, if you go to Hong Kong, GABRIELA is very huge, because the women that are organized there are mostly domestic workers. So the conditions are very good to organize them, because every Sunday they are in the parks and they are gathered together. And organizing means you really have to go there, like to swim where they are and educate them and talk with them. And in fact, we also have this kind of how do you call it? A kind of method where to be able to organize, especially women, step by step, you really first have to befriend them. So you have to be there, engaged in their conversation. It doesn't have to start politically. It has to really start from where are they coming from. So you have to, in that way, that's already a kind of analysis. So you go there, where are they coming from? And who are the women here who are actually already advanced in their analysis, and who are in the middle, and who are who needs more support, etc. So that you kind of differentiate who could actually be organized in such a way that the others would also be organized. And it's working very well in areas that many Filipinas actually are. So in Hong Kong, even in the US. It's also very interesting because in the US, the profile of women that are being organized are quite different. In the US, they were very successful in organizing the second generation, and that's what we are currently applying now in Germany. And so far, we're gaining some numbers, if that's the level of measure how successful we are, because somehow, at least this is our initial analysis, second generation Filipinas or Filipinos. So we also decided to even take care of the Filipinos. So we don't just say, oh, you're not a woman, you should not be part of it. In the end, it's important to even take them into that narrative, or to take them into that space, as long as, of course, they also subscribe to the fact that women needs to struggle. So and they respect that. So this second generation, they're looking for, I don't want to focus into that, but they really start from identity. So in the Philippines, identity is something that we don't let's say prioritize, because that was never the main issue in the Philippines. For us, we always see identity as something that could really divide you, because the moment you say identity, I'm this, and that, then you start having small cells of people who are very much strongly connected to their identity, rather than into looking that this is a class struggle. But as I've said, according to our experience, this is really where they start, and you have to start from there. You really have to kind of not engage them in a debate and to crush this kind of level that they are from, but to help them sort it out and help them really realize later on that identity is just part of this bigger dominance, or a bigger structural dominance that is still dictated by social and economic. So you still kind of slowly slide into that class. This is something that is primary, the primary factor that could unite us, and then later on you go to that identity, and then race, etc., etc. So they find themselves connected with the organization, and they are motivated to work. Even, for example, some of them have rarely visited the Philippines. They could actually already connect into what it means to assert your identity, and also to assert that you are being repressed or oppressed, also not only with your identity, but also your economic and social standing. Yeah.